welcome to another A-Level Computer Science video with me, Mr Goff, for mrgoff.com. This video carries on from the challenge set at the end of the last video and goes through how to create a student records program using object-oriented programming. In the last video, we created this student object to use to store details for a student record. Now we're going to use it in a program. We will build an application that can add new students, remove students, and list all students. A link to a pre-prepared REPL shown here will appear in the notes to this video. Please open this in Replit and try it yourself before watching the sections where I go through the solutions. You might want to pause the video now before we move on to the solution to challenge 1. All of the tasks we're going to complete are the subroutines needed for this basic main program that consists of an array for storing student objects and a menu loop to decide what to do. Challenge 1 deals with adding new students. The Add Student module needs to be past the students array because we're going to put a new student object inside the array. If we didn't pass it the student array and we just edited it, we'd be using that student array as a global variable, which would be bad practice. To add a new student, we simply request all of the data from the user, and then we call the student object and store it within a new variable. We can then append that variable to the student's array that we've passed into our subroutine. Here you can see that I've printed the students array after each time that we add a new student so that you can see the objects being added. With our new student object added to our students array, we can now return that students array. Because we're using this method of passing and returning the array, we would call it by saying students equals add student students, and this would return the updated array with the new student in it. That's why you can see on the right in the example that after we've added 2 students, there are 2 objects in the array. You might like to pause now if you haven't completed challenge 2 before I go on to explain how that is done. Challenge 2 is the Remove Student module. This also needs to have the students array passed in and returned to avoid using the students array as a global variable. Within our subroutine, we start by creating a for I in range loop that will go for as long as the length of students, which is the array we've just passed in. Using our f string, we're going to print out I plus 1. The purpose of that is just to make sure the list starts at 1 and not at 0, which might seem strange. And then we've used our appropriate getters to be able to get the forename and surname of each of the students. Now that the user has seen the list, they simply enter the number of the student that they wish to remove, and using the Python list method pop, we're able to remove the particular student that they choose. Remember that when we were outputting our list, we said I plus 1, so we'll need to take 1 away from their choice in order to remove the correct student from the array. We then return the students array back to the main program. Because we are passing in the students array and returning it again, the correct way to call this is students equals remove student students, and this will return the array that now has 1 less student in it. You can see in the example here that after we've chosen to remove one of the people, that afterwards they're no longer in our array. You might like to pause the video again now if you haven't had a go at completing challenge 3 before I go through the solution to that one. For challenge 3, the list students module, we still pass in the students array, but there's no need to return it as nothing changes in the students array during the running of this subroutine. As there's no need to number off the students this time, I've used a simpler for x in y loop rather than a for I in range loop. We still go through each of the students that is in our students array. If you're not too familiar with f strings, some of the small things I've done here include, for the student number, where I've got :04, this ensures that no matter how many digits that I'd entered for the student number, it would pad it out to 4 by putting in leading zeros. Where I've got a colon and I've got a left-facing arrow and 10, that means that I'm going to make sure that the forename is always going to take up 10 spaces. I've done the same with the surname, and it makes it look like the data is in a more tabular format. You should pause the video again now if you'd like to have a go at challenge 4 before I go through the answer to that. So for those that were trying this extension task, you may have realized fairly quickly that you can't actually save an object to a text file as it is. To perform this task, we import a module into Python called pickle. This performs something called serialization. This means we can turn objects into a string of binary digits so that they can be stored. We'll actually look at the bottom here first. So if you have a look at the bottom, that's what we're going to do when we are closing the program. So we're going to open the student file.pickle, and that says WB for write binary. We're then going to dump into it the contents of students, and then we're going to close that particular file. Now the bit on the top, we're actually using a try except error, and we're going to see, is there a student file.pickle? And if there is, we're then going to load that file back in, and then we'll be able to use the objects that we had stored, and we'll close the file again. If not, then we'll say there's been an input-output error because we couldn't find a file of that name, and therefore we'll start with a blank student array. In the example to the right, I printed the students arrays merely so you could see that the objects had actually been imported, and then ran the list all students module so that you could see that we were able to print out the ones that we had loaded up from our stored version. That brings us to the end of this exemplar of the student records program using object-oriented programming. Join me again soon when I'll be looking at linked lists and stacks. Use the resources at mrgoff.com to help you revise computer science, and until next time, it's bye for now.